The Banshees of Inisherin is a great 2022 movie starring Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson. Once again, harkening back to Martin McDonagh's In Bruges, his first feature movie. These two guys were in that. They were excellent. That's an excellent movie. This one is another great one by McDonagh, who's a playwright, a good screenwriter. And here I think he shows himself off as a very, very good director. Quick plot summary. The movie is about Calm, played by Brendan Gleeson, an artist isolated on this remote island in Inisherin, and he breaks up essentially with his friend, acquaintance, Parek, a farmer who he claims is dull-witted and dumb. Parek regales him with conversation about his donkey poop for 2 hours. He's a guy who idly babbles, according to Calm. Calm wants to make great music, and I think he finds that his imagination, his senses are dulled by having repeated stupid conversations with this farmer. So one day he just says, "Please leave me alone, never talk to me again. Don't want to talk to you because you're actively harming my ability to make music."
I just don't like you no more.
From this simple but brutal and honest request spins out a whole tale about these two men and all the people and the relationships around them. This is movies that comment on all kinds of things. And one thing to notice, of course, is the backdrop or background, the Irish Civil War of 1922 to 1923. Occasionally you hear gunfire in the background on the mainland. This island is just right off the coast of the mainland. And you hear talk about people in the mainland with the Irish Civil War. What's happening on this island, as it turns out, Parek gets really annoyed. It keeps pestering Calm. Calm threatens violence. And then you have an escalation. And this escalation, unfortunately, mirrors in a very small, very local, very petty way, I suppose, what's going on with the Irish Civil War. Why did two men fight? Why did two men resort to violence? These are questions that come up. And then how does that relate to wider, Civil War type things where large groups of people do the same thing for petty reasons?
I have a set of shears at home, and each time you bother me from this day on, I'll take those shears and I'll take one of my fingers off with them. And I'll give that finger to you.
So along with these two guys, you have other characters and wonderful pair relationship in this. Parek lives with his sister Siobhan, who seems to be the smartest, most educated person, most cultivated person on the island. She's a female, though, and treated as such. She's called out for being a single middle-aged woman on the island. The other guys aren't called out for being single and middle-aged, but she is. Why isn't she married yet? And she faces the prospect of turning into an old woman, like the old woman in this, who is isolated and alone, considered to be quote-unquote a ghoul. She's a banshee-like figure. Of course, with a title like this, the Irish folklore figure of a banshee, a wailing, lamenting, spiritual freak of a figure. Is that what this old woman is? I don't know. The movie is mythical and realistic at the same time, both in terms of the island setting. It's a fictional island. It's not real. And also, this woman appears to predict the future a couple times, but maybe she's just an old woman after all and not really a banshee. I think Siobhan, though, looks at her and sees her future. And so then she looks at all the men, and there's a male-female dynamic in this movie, and asks herself some questions about why they treat each other the way they treat each other. Why are they all so stupid or boring? That comes up in this movie as well.
This isn't about Inisherin. It's about one boring man leaving another man alone, that's all.
One boring man, you're all feckin' boring. With your piddling grievances over nothing, you're all feckin' boring.
Another character is Dominic, and Dominic is maybe the dullest or most dim-witted of all, if you want to think of the characters in those categories, but he might also be the sweetest. And so Parek has a hard time even talking to him, even though Parek has had Calm say, "Hey, I don't want to be your friend." I think nobody wants to be Dominic's friend, and yet he's the harshest treated of all by his father in particular, who's not just a drunk, but also the policeman and a figure of law, which is very interesting for this movie. So it turns out we don't just have Calm and Parek and their ex-friendship. We have Parek and Siobhan. We have Siobhan and Calm. We have Siobhan and Dominic and Parek and Dominic. And all these relationships, you're supposed to ask questions about how each relate to each other, and especially how they treat each other. And the question of friendship in this movie comes up all over the place. And it's not just a question, I think, for 1923 Ireland and the Irish Civil War, which no doubt this movie is about. This movie is about the modern world and people being, one, lonely and isolated. And yes, there's no technology in this movie. There's not even cars, but it does have this echo of people are on their phones. They're isolating themselves into a virtual world. And if I can read the movie that way, I wonder why it's coming out in 2022. What it says about this day and age, this time period. It's about people being lonely and people not having friends, or friends being not real friends, ex-friends, or friends who are rude to you. This question then that comes up is, should you be nice to people or not? That's a classic internet ethical question. Nice to people you don't know, nice to people your acquaintances, or should you be open and honest with them? And in fact, telling them, as Calm does, I don't want to be your friend anymore. Is that the better solution to things, or ghosting them? Would that be better? A classic internet question, but also a real world question too. Now we're going to dive into spoilers and have to think about the movie as a whole. So go watch this movie, it's great. The spoiler is that Calm threatens violence, and violence on himself, cutting off his fingers every time that Powerek shows up and annoys him and talks to him. And he will do this, which is the shock of the movie, I think echoing Flannery O'Connor and Irish folktale stuff and classic European folktales and so on. So here Powerek has to deal with the guilt, but maybe he doesn't because he keeps talking to Calm and can't stop himself. And this is like when Calm says, don't be my friend anymore, that just energizes Powerek, or actually isolates and makes him lonelier. And he keeps coming back to Calm, but Calm is violent. And the giant question is, why does he actively self-mutilate, harming himself from making music, when that's his stated reason for quitting the friendship with Powerek? Why is he cutting off his fingers, which harm his ability to make music? I'm sure that's a mystery. We could just say it's hard to understand. These men are irrational or stupid in their own ways. But I think also the despair question comes up. In both confession scenes with Calm, the priest discusses despair. And how's your despair doing, Calm? I think Calm, ultimately the problem with him is that despair, which may be derived from the environment. It's isolated and lonely. A paradox because it's beautiful. It's a place you might want to stay at for an Airbnb vacation. It's beautiful Irish green photography in this movie. Great for Instagram, but you look at it and if you live there day after day, it would be isolating and lonely. And maybe that's what Calm feels in his soul. Another great question that comes up, and this is a 2022-23 question, why do people think that animals are better or treat animals better than humans? Comes up throughout the movie, and the dog and the donkey are seen as symbols of innocence. The donkey coming into the household, being domesticated, being a friend as it were. The dog is the same thing. And for both men, they are willing to spare the animals, or willing to feel badly about the animals whenever something bad happens to them. But when it happens to the humans, that's less important or less interesting to them, perhaps. I find this question is massive because, yes, animal rights and animal activism is one thing, but also I do think at times animals are overvalued as opposed to humans who are ill-treated, treated as donkeys or treated as fodder or cows in this movie at times, in the way that Dominic is treated, for example. And maybe if you take this tack, the way that Powerek is treated by Calm. I'm not sure about that, but I think that's an interesting question. It's like, should you be nice to people, nicer to people than you are to animals? I do love the central dilemma in this. Calm wants his time, his opportunity cost, and it's dwindling away, he says. So he needs things that fuel his imagination in order to make music. And having this relationship with this dull farmer, dull to him, is doing him absolutely no good. In fact, actually harming his ability to make music, so he claims. So he gets rid of him. But meanwhile, this is his neighbor, a man he sees every single day. And shouldn't he be kind to him? Actually, we see him be kind to Powerek during this movie. Even after they've broken up and Calm says, never talk to me again, he's still kind. So he treats him neighborly, at least at times. And it's this fascinating dynamic of who should you give your time over to? A giant life question. Who should you give time to and who should you ignore? And then that's a real question for the internet for sure, but also maybe as well in real life. And I think we all know people who we want to break up with in real life. And I'm not talking about romantic relationships, just friendships. I don't want to talk to you anymore. Can we say that outright to people? Or is it wrong to do so? This classic, interesting, fascinating ethical question to me. I find that in the end, the two men are at war with each other. And to me, this is a mini, tiny, minuscule picture of civil war itself. The ending where the two men are alone on the beach. You know what's happened in this movie. Siobhan has often left, and she's willing to go to the mainland where they're fighting a war to get away from these guys. Also, Dominic has died, killed himself, so we've lost him. And at the end, we're left with this sort of mythical banshee old woman figure haunting them, looking over them, while they are alone. And to me, that's what war does. It isolates people and reduces them down to just two sides, this side versus that side, getting rid of all the nuance, all the wonderful extra stuff that I think Dominic and Shaban were bringing to the island. You've lost the sensitive people, you've lost the smart, educated people, and you're down to these two bumbling idiots. So we're the two warring men. They're not really idiots, but the two warring men, I think, is a great picture of civil war. And a giant commentary on McDonagh's part, who's always messing with this paradise theme of lost, specifically of lost paradise. These men are in a beautiful, excellent place. The opening and closing shots are of this beautiful Irish place, and yet they are taking it, and all you need is two people to screw everything up, as with Adam and Eve in Genesis, but also with these two guys here in sort of a mini Irish Civil War context. To me, McDonagh is teaching us how to watch this movie. His film grammar is great, his shot making is great, and he's getting fascinating, excellent performances out of these guys. I think Colin Farrell is fantastic in this. I don't care what anybody says. Brendan Gleeson is always good. Colin Farrell is amazing. Could have had the Oscar for this. But everybody else in this is really, really good too. The moments with the donkey and the dog are excellent. So for all those reasons, I think this is a great movie. And I think it has timeless philosophical questions and ideas that relate not to 1922, to 2022, and probably to 2122. I think some of these things will come up for people then. So for all those reasons, I think this movie is very good and will last quite a long time. What do you think of the Banshees of Inisherin, which is a movie, obviously, with the title of a song that's written in the movie, but maybe there are also real banshees on the island? I don't know, but what do you think about this movie? Let us know in the comments. Please subscribe to the channel for more great content. Thanks, and have a great day.